As the conflict between Russia and Ukraine drags on, new evidence continues to surface that paints a horrifying picture of war crimes committed during the ongoing invasion. With reports in 2024 shedding light on atrocities that defy basic human decency, international investigators and human rights bodies have been working tirelessly to hold perpetrators accountable. It seems that in this war, not only are soldiers clashing, but humanity itself is under siege. Systematic brutality. The scope of the crimes. Since the Russian invasion began, the scale of war crimes committed has been staggering, with the world bearing witness to some of the darkest chapters of modern warfare. The UN's Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine has revealed widespread and systematic atrocities, including the use of torture, sexual violence, and unlawful deportations of Ukrainian civilians and children to Russia. In 2024, reports from regions like Kherson and Zaporizhia have exposed gruesome torture methods, electric shocks, suffocation, and brutal beatings used on civilians suspected of being Ukrainian sympathizers. Victims have recounted the harrowing details, including one man who endured electric shocks every time he claimed ignorance. Survivors often describe the experience as feeling like a lifetime of agony compressed into a few hours of barbarity. This isn't a random act of cruelty. It's a methodical and deliberate attempt to break the will of the Ukrainian population. Explosive weapons and civilian casualties. Beyond the direct violence of torture and assaults, Russian forces have deployed explosive weapons in civilian areas with devastating consequences. The Commission's investigations uncovered shocking evidence of strikes on homes, schools, hospitals, and essential infrastructure. In one particularly heart-wrenching case in April 2024, an attack on a residential building in Uman claimed the lives of 24 civilians, the majority of whom were women and children. These aren't isolated incidents. They reflect a broader strategy of targeting civilian populations to demoralize the Ukrainian resistance and disrupt daily life. Imagine waking up one morning to find your home, your neighbors, your entire way of life destroyed in a single moment of violence. These attacks have crippled communities, displacing millions and leaving survivors to pick up the pieces of shattered lives. War crimes or genocide. One of the most pressing and disturbing questions to emerge from these investigations is whether the actions of Russian forces amount to genocide. The intentional targeting of civilian populations, the deportation of children, and the systemic violence against ethnic Ukrainians point to a potential campaign of ethnic cleansing. While the Commission has not yet confirmed genocidal intent, investigators are closely examining Russian media propaganda, which has been accused of inciting violence against Ukrainians. Genocide is not just a matter of numbers, it's about intent. If it's proven that these atrocities are part of a larger strategy to erase Ukrainian identity, the consequences could reshape how the world views this conflict. It would also mark a significant escalation in the legal and moral implications of the war, prompting urgent calls for international intervention. Children as pawns in war. Perhaps one of the most heartbreaking aspects of this conflict has been the unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children to Russian territories. Under the guise of protection, Russian authorities have forcibly relocated thousands of children, separating them from their families and homes. These actions, which violate international law, have been categorized as war crimes by the UN. In one particularly egregious case, 31 children were deported in May 2022, with no clarity on their whereabouts or conditions. Further investigations revealed more instances of these deportations, igniting global outrage. Children are the most vulnerable victims of war, and their removal from their homes not only robs them of their childhood, but also raises questions about Russia's intent. Is this an attempt to Russify these children, erasing their Ukrainian heritage and indoctrinating them into a different national identity? The world is watching, and international pressure is mounting to reunite these children with their families. Torture that leaves permanent scars. Torture, one of the most egregious forms of human rights violations, continues to be a prevalent tool used by Russian forces against Ukrainian civilians and combatants. In regions like Kherson and Zaporizhia, investigators uncovered instances where detainees were subjected to electric shocks, beatings, and mock executions. The sheer cruelty of these acts is almost incomprehensible, with some victims recounting torture so brutal that they lost consciousness only to be revived and tortured again. In one particularly chilling account, a 75-year-old woman who refused to abandon her home was raped and tortured by a Russian soldier, leaving her with broken ribs and teeth. The physical wounds inflicted by torture may heal, but the psychological scars last a lifetime. These victims, many of whom were just trying to protect their homes and families, are left to grapple with the trauma for the rest of their lives. This isn't just a war. It's a campaign of terror designed to break the human spirit. The destruction of civilian life. Beyond the immediate violence of the battlefield, the destruction of civilian infrastructure has left Ukraine in a state of ruin. Schools, hospitals, and even playgrounds have been targeted in what investigators are calling a deliberate attempt to destroy the social fabric of Ukrainian life. In many cases, these attacks have crippled the nation's ability to provide basic services to its citizens, leaving millions without access to healthcare, education, or even clean water. Imagine sending your child to school only to find out that their classroom has been reduced to rubble. The psychological toll of this destruction is immense, as families struggle not only to survive, but also to maintain some semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos. This isn't just collateral damage. It's a war on the very idea of civilian life. What justice looks like. As the scope of these atrocities becomes clearer, the world is grappling with how to bring the perpetrators to justice. The International Criminal Court and various human rights organizations have opened investigations into the war crimes committed by both Russian and Ukrainian forces, though the bulk of the focus remains on Russian actions. In this year, several high-ranking Russian military officials were charged with war crimes, but many of the individuals responsible for these atrocities remain at large. Justice in wartime is always complicated, but for the victims, it is essential. The road to accountability is long and fraught with political and legal challenges, but the international community has vowed not to let these crimes go unanswered. As the investigations continue, the world will be watching closely to see if justice will finally be served. Ukraine fights back on all fronts. While the Ukrainian military continues to defend its territory on the battlefield, the war crimes investigations have become another front in the fight for Ukraine's survival. Ukrainian officials have been working closely with international investigators to document every atrocity, gathering evidence that can be used in future prosecutions. This includes digital records, eyewitness testimonies, and even satellite imagery of destroyed civilian infrastructure. Ukraine's resilience in the face of such overwhelming adversity has garnered international sympathy and support, and the government is determined to hold every perpetrator accountable. But this isn't just about justice. It's about reclaiming their identity and ensuring that the world remembers the horrors they have endured. And that wraps up our deep dive into the shocking evidence of war crimes in Ukraine uncovered in 2024. If you found this video informative and want to stay updated on critical international issues like this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. And make sure you click the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.